You are about to discover a force quietly controlling how you see yourself, how you measure your success, and how confident you feel every single day. It doesn't announce itself. It slips into your thoughts unnoticed, whispering comparisons between your life and someone else's highlight, someone else's achievements, someone else's moments carefully displayed for the world to see. Every time you look, it grows stronger, convincing you that your effort is never enough, your progress is too slow, your worth depends on what others are doing. This force does not care about your purpose, your discipline, or your values. It only demands attention and obedience. By the time you realize it, it has already begun reshaping your identity, your decisions, and your confidence. The question is simple. Will you continue letting it control you, or will you reclaim your mind and your life starting now? Chapter 1. The Invisible Trap. How comparison quietly hijacks your confidence. Comparison begins as a simple mental reflex, yet it gradually becomes an invisible structure, shaping how you evaluate your worth, your progress, and your potential. You rarely notice the moment comparison first enters your thinking, because it often arrives disguised as curiosity, observation, or harmless evaluation of another person's circumstances or achievements. Your mind has always possessed the ability to measure differences between situations, outcomes, and individuals, because survival historically required careful assessment of threats, opportunities, and social standing. However, a natural ability designed for awareness slowly transforms into a destructive habit when it becomes the primary tool you use to measure your identity. When comparison quietly becomes your default method of self-evaluation, your sense of worth begins shifting from internal stability toward external measurement. You stop asking whether your actions align with your values, and instead begin asking whether your results resemble someone else's visible progress. This shift appears subtle at first, yet it carries significant consequences for the structure of your confidence. Confidence cannot survive in an environment where your internal standards constantly compete against external benchmarks that you did not design. Once comparison begins directing your attention outward, your mind slowly abandons the discipline required to measure life according to personal purpose and responsibility. Instead of evaluating your growth against your previous position, you begin measuring your position against another person's visible advantage. The damage produced by comparison rarely arrives as a dramatic collapse, because it erodes confidence through quiet, repeated psychological adjustments. Each moment of comparison moves your focus slightly away from personal development and slightly toward external approval. Over time, those small shifts accumulate until your internal compass begins losing its authority. You begin questioning decisions that once felt clear, simply because someone else appears to be advancing faster or receiving greater recognition. Comparison does not simply observe differences between individuals, because it quietly assigns meaning and judgment to those differences. Once that judgment becomes habitual, your mind begins translating another person's visible success into silent evidence of your own supposed inadequacy. That interpretation often emerges without conscious permission, yet it steadily reshapes how you see yourself. Confidence weakens whenever your identity becomes dependent on information that you cannot fully understand or control. You rarely see the full context behind another person's visible success, yet comparison convinces you that incomplete information provides a reliable basis for personal evaluation. The result is a distorted internal conversation where you evaluate your effort against outcomes that were shaped by circumstances invisible to you. In earlier eras, comparison remained limited by geography, community size, and slower communication between individuals. Your attention remained focused primarily on the small group of people directly surrounding your daily life. Modern environments have removed those natural boundaries, expanding your exposure to thousands of visible lives within a single moment. The human mind was never designed to evaluate itself against an unlimited number of individuals displaying carefully selected achievements. Yet modern digital environments present these comparisons continuously, often without pause or context. This constant exposure quietly trains your mind to believe that evaluation must happen constantly. Instead of observing another person's progress with neutral awareness, your mind begins translating every visible milestone into a silent measurement of your own position. The result is a psychological trap that rarely announces itself directly. Comparison feels logical because the human mind naturally seeks patterns, rankings, and hierarchies when interpreting complex environments. However, confidence cannot grow inside a structure that constantly forces your attention toward someone else's progress. Every moment spent measuring another person's results gradually reduces the time available for strengthening your own direction. Comparison also introduces an emotional pressure that subtly reshapes your decision-making. You begin choosing actions that appear competitive rather than actions that genuinely serve your long-term purpose. This shift creates an unstable foundation because external recognition becomes the standard guiding your effort. When recognition becomes the primary measure of success, your motivation becomes fragile. Recognition fluctuates according to trends, visibility, and public perception, all of which remain largely outside your control. Confidence requires something far more stable than public visibility. It requires consistent alignment between your effort, your values, and your long-term direction. Comparison interrupts that alignment by inserting external benchmarks between you and your own progress. Once that interruption becomes habitual, your internal standards begin weakening. You may still work hard and pursue improvement, yet the underlying motivation gradually shifts toward proving something rather than building something. That distinction matters deeply. Effort directed toward proving worth constantly seeks validation, while effort directed toward building mastery focuses on disciplined progress. Comparison rarely allows the patience required for mastery because it constantly highlights someone else's apparent advantage. The moment you begin believing that another person's visible progress defines your own position, your confidence becomes vulnerable to every new comparison. A single achievement displayed by someone else can suddenly cause you to question months or years of personal development. That reaction may appear irrational, yet it becomes predictable once comparison shapes your thinking. Your mind interprets another person's visible success as a reference point that supposedly exposes your own shortcomings. However, that interpretation ignores a critical reality. Every life unfolds according to unique variables that cannot be replicated or compared with precision. Circumstances, timing, resources, relationships, and unseen struggles all influence outcomes in ways that remain invisible from the outside. Comparison removes those complexities and replaces them with simplified rankings that rarely reflect truth. Once those simplified rankings dominate your thinking, your confidence becomes unstable. You begin feeling ahead one moment and behind the next, depending entirely on what information appears before you. Confidence cannot survive in a structure that shifts according to external observation. It requires a stable reference point rooted in personal responsibility and disciplined self-evaluation. The invisible trap of comparison slowly replaces that stable reference point with constant external measurement. When the shift continues unchecked, you begin losing contact with the quiet authority that should guide your effort. The mind becomes busy evaluating everyone else's movement rather than strengthening your own direction. Yet recognizing this trap provides the first step toward restoring control. You cannot eliminate the human ability to notice differences between individuals, because awareness remains a natural function of the mind. However, you can refuse to grant those observations the authority to define your worth or determine your direction. Confidence strengthens when your evaluation returns to the only comparison that truly matters. You measure today's effort against yesterday's discipline, and you measure tomorrow's goals against today's commitment. That form of comparison strengthens identity rather than weakening it. The invisible trap begins losing power the moment you recognize that your life was never designed to operate according to someone else's visible timeline. Chapter 2. The highlight reel effect. Why you are always comparing your life to someone else's best moment. The modern world has quietly constructed an environment where you are constantly exposed to carefully selected fragments of other people's lives. These fragments rarely represent ordinary reality, yet they strongly influence how you interpret your own progress and personal circumstances. Most visible success presented in public spaces reflects a deliberate selection process rather than a balanced representation of everyday life. Individuals naturally choose to display moments that communicate strength, achievement, recognition, and upward movement. Very few people publicly document uncertainty, failure, confusion, or the long periods of effort that produce no visible reward. The result is an environment filled with isolated peaks of success presented without the valleys that preceded them. Your mind observes these peaks and interprets them as continuous reality, rather than rare moments emerging from long sequences of unseen effort. This distortion quietly reshapes how you evaluate your own experiences. You compare the ordinary rhythm of your daily life against another person's most visible milestone. The comparison feels unfair, yet your mind rarely pauses long enough to question the accuracy of the information it receives. Digital culture intensifies this distortion by accelerating how frequently you encounter curated success. Within a few minutes of casual observation, you may see dozens of people displaying promotions, celebrations, financial gains, travel experiences, and visible achievements. Each moment represents a carefully selected highlight extracted from a much longer personal timeline. However, your mind processes these highlights as if they represent everyday reality. This constant exposure gradually convinces you that progress should appear dramatic, visible, and immediately recognizable. When your own development unfolds through slower and quieter stages, it begins to feel insufficient. You start questioning whether your effort is producing meaningful results simply because your progress lacks the same visible presentation. The highlight reel effect does not simply distort how you see other people. It slowly distorts how you interpret your own journey. You forget that most meaningful development occurs away from public attention. Skill development, discipline formation, emotional resilience, and intellectual growth rarely produce dramatic visual evidence during their early stages. These forms of progress grow quietly through repeated effort and deliberate patience. However, the highlight-driven environment rarely displays those quiet phases of development. Instead, it emphasizes the final result after the invisible work has already been completed. Your mind then compares your current stage of preparation against another person's visible moment of achievement. That comparison inevitably creates the illusion that you are falling behind. Yet the comparison itself remains fundamentally flawed. You are observing the visible outcome of someone else's process, while experiencing the invisible preparation within your own process. The mind rarely recognizes this imbalance because the highlight appears convincing and complete. Without careful awareness, you begin believing that everyone else is advancing through life with unusual speed and certainty. Meanwhile, your own progress appears slower, less dramatic, and filled with uncertainty. This interpretation quietly undermines confidence because it replaces patience with unnecessary urgency. You begin feeling pressure to produce visible results quickly in order to keep pace with the success you observe around you. However, meaningful development rarely responds well to rushed expectations. The most stable forms of confidence grow from repeated discipline rather than sudden visibility. When comparison pressures you to accelerate your timeline, you risk abandoning the slow foundations that support lasting progress. The highlight reel effect also creates a misleading sense of constant achievement within your environment. You observe many individuals succeeding at different moments, yet your mind merges those moments into a single, continuous stream of success. It appears as though everyone else is moving forward simultaneously, while you remain stationary. In reality, you are witnessing scattered moments drawn from thousands of separate personal timelines. Each achievement you observe may represent years of preparation, setbacks, and unseen persistence. Yet the highlight presentation removes that history, leaving only the final moment visible. When context disappears, comparison becomes dangerously misleading. Your mind begins interpreting incomplete information as a reliable measure of your own position. Confidence gradually weakens whenever your evaluation depends on information that lacks context. The highlight reel effect thrives precisely because it removes the context required for accurate judgment. Another consequence of this environment is the subtle pressure to curate your own life in response. When you observe others displaying success, you may feel compelled to present your own achievements with similar emphasis. This behavior strengthens the cycle because everyone begins contributing to the same distorted environment. Each person shares carefully selected victories while quietly managing private challenges outside public view. The collective result is a social space where visible life appears far more successful, stable, and exciting than ordinary reality. Yet beneath that presentation, most individuals are navigating the same uncertainties, responsibilities, and gradual progress that define human experience. Confidence begins recovering when you recognize the difference between a highlight and a full life. A highlight represents a moment, while a life contains thousands of moments unfolding with varying levels of visibility and recognition. When you evaluate your progress honestly, you must consider the entire process rather than isolated peaks. Your discipline, preparation, and steady improvement carry far greater significance than any single visible milestone. The highlight reel effect loses influence when you refuse to measure your daily life against someone else's carefully selected moment. Instead, you begin measuring your development against the quiet commitments that shape your long-term direction. Progress regains its true meaning when it is evaluated through patience, responsibility, and consistent effort. The moment you stop treating another person's highlight as a reliable standard, your confidence begins returning to its proper foundation. Your life is not a performance designed for external validation. It is a long process of disciplined growth unfolding according to circumstances uniquely assigned to you. And that process cannot be accurately judged through someone else's most visible moment. Chapter 3. The Confidence Erosion Cycle. How Small Comparisons Slowly Destroy Self-Belief. Confidence rarely disappears suddenly because its erosion normally unfolds through small, repeated mental adjustments that seem harmless when viewed individually. You do not wake one morning with confidence fully intact and lose it entirely by evening. Instead, the decline begins through small comparisons that appear insignificant during the moment they occur. Each comparison introduces a quiet question into your thinking about whether your effort, progress, or ability measures up against someone else's visible outcome. At first, the question may pass quickly through your awareness without creating noticeable disturbance. However, repetition gradually gives the question greater authority within your internal dialogue. When the mind begins asking the same comparison-based question repeatedly, it slowly begins accepting the question itself as legitimate. Once the question becomes legitimate, your mind begins searching for answers that reinforce the comparison. The process rarely produces balanced conclusions because comparison already assumes that external results represent the correct standard of evaluation. This assumption quietly undermines your ability to interpret your own progress with clarity. You begin examining your achievements through a lens that emphasizes perceived deficiencies rather than disciplined improvement. A single comparison may not significantly disturb your confidence, yet repeated comparisons accumulate psychological pressure over time. Your mind begins storing small moments of perceived inadequacy as evidence that something about your progress is insufficient. Those stored impressions slowly influence how you interpret future situations. When another comparison appears, your mind recalls previous comparisons and treats them as confirmation of an emerging pattern. The pattern may not exist in reality, yet your mind begins believing that it does. Confidence weakens when your mind gradually builds a narrative suggesting that your progress consistently falls short of external examples. This narrative rarely emerges through deliberate reasoning. Instead, it develops through subtle emotional impressions created by repeated comparisons. You may still work hard and pursue improvement, yet your belief in the value of that effort quietly begins weakening. Effort without belief gradually becomes exhausting because your mind no longer feels certain that persistence will produce meaningful results. The confidence erosion cycle strengthens whenever effort continues while belief declines. You continue investing energy, yet the internal foundation supporting that effort begins feeling unstable. As the cycle deepens, you may begin interpreting ordinary challenges as confirmation that you are falling behind. Normal obstacles become amplified because your mind already suspects that your position is weaker than it should be. This interpretation alters your response to pressure. Instead of viewing difficulty as a natural stage within growth, you begin interpreting it as evidence that something about your ability is insufficient. That shift significantly changes the emotional experience of effort. Work that once felt purposeful begins feeling like a constant attempt to prove your worth. When effort becomes a continuous attempt to prove something, fatigue increases while satisfaction decreases. You may accomplish meaningful progress, yet the accomplishment rarely produces lasting confidence. The mind immediately compares the result against another visible achievement and concludes that more must be done before confidence becomes justified. This cycle prevents satisfaction from stabilizing within your identity. Every result becomes temporary because comparison immediately introduces a new standard. Your progress therefore feels incomplete regardless of how much effort you invest. Another consequence of this cycle is the gradual shrinking of your willingness to take meaningful risks. Confidence normally allows you to pursue difficult opportunities because you trust your ability to adapt and learn. However, when comparison erodes that trust, risk begins feeling dangerous rather than challenging. You begin avoiding situations where your performance might be visibly evaluated against others. Avoidance initially appears protective because it prevents immediate discomfort. Yet avoidance quietly strengthens the belief that you must protect yourself from comparison rather than outgrow it. The more you avoid visible challenges, the fewer opportunities you create for confidence to rebuild through experience. Your world gradually becomes smaller because comparison has convinced you that exposure carries unnecessary danger. This contraction of opportunity further reinforces the narrative that your position is weaker than it should be. The erosion cycle therefore continues, feeding itself through repeated psychological reinforcement. Comparison produces doubt. Doubt influences behavior Behavior limits opportunity, and limited opportunity appears to confirm the doubt. Breaking the cycle requires recognizing that comparison itself introduced the distortion. Your confidence did not weaken because your potential disappeared. It weakened because your evaluation system became dependent on unstable external reference points. When evaluation returns to disciplined self-measurement, the cycle begins losing its power. You begin asking different questions about your progress. Instead of asking whether your results match someone else's outcome, you begin asking whether today's effort improved upon yesterday's discipline. This shift restores a sense of control because the standard becomes personal responsibility rather than external ranking. Self-belief strengthens when you measure improvement against your own previous position rather than someone else's visible milestone. Each improvement then becomes genuine evidence of growth rather than temporary relief from comparison. The mind begins rebuilding trust in your ability to progress through disciplined effort. Confidence grows quietly when your attention returns to the work itself rather than the ranking surrounding the work. Small comparisons may still appear within your awareness, yet they no longer carry the authority to define your identity. You recognize them as distractions rather than reliable measures of worth. The erosion cycle ends the moment comparison loses its position as the judge of your progress. When your standards return to disciplined self-evaluation, confidence gradually rebuilds through steady alignment between effort and purpose. Chapter 4. The Status Game. Why modern society programs you to compete with everyone. Modern society quietly organizes human interaction around systems that reward visible ranking, recognition, and competitive positioning. These systems influence how individuals interpret success, opportunity, and personal worth. You may not consciously agree with these structures, yet they shape the environment within which your decisions unfold. From early education onward, individuals are introduced to systems that measure performance through comparison with others. Grades, rankings, promotions, financial indicators, and public recognition all function as signals communicating relative position within a larger hierarchy. These signals may appear practical because organizations often require methods for evaluating performance. However, repeated exposure to ranking systems gradually trains the mind to interpret life itself as a competitive scoreboard. You begin viewing progress through the language of winning, losing, leading, or falling behind. This mindset may produce short-term motivation, yet it also introduces constant psychological tension. When life becomes defined by competition, every achievement carries the implication that someone else occupies a lower position. Likewise, every visible success by another individual may appear to threaten your own standing. The status game, therefore, encourages continuous comparison between individuals who may actually be pursuing entirely different purposes. This competition rarely acknowledges the diversity of human paths. Different individuals possess different strengths, interests, responsibilities, and circumstances that naturally lead toward different forms of contribution. However, status systems often compress those differences into simplified measures of success. Income, visibility, influence, and recognition become dominant signals used to estimate someone's perceived value within the social structure. When these signals dominate cultural thinking, individuals begin believing that life must be organized around the pursuit of status itself. Your goals gradually shift toward outcomes that produce recognition rather than outcomes that align with your authentic strengths. This shift may remain subtle, yet it significantly influences the direction of your effort. You begin pursuing goals that appear impressive to others rather than goals that genuinely express your capabilities and values. The status game intensifies when social comparison becomes widely visible through digital environments. Achievements that once remained private or local now circulate widely across public networks. Your exposure to other people's progress expands dramatically, even when those individuals live entirely separate lives from your own. This exposure strengthens the illusion that you are participating in a universal competition against thousands of unseen rivals. The mind begins scanning constantly for signals indicating whether you are advancing or falling behind. Such scanning consumes mental energy that could otherwise strengthen focused work. Instead of directing attention toward mastery and improvement, your mind repeatedly checks the external scoreboard. Confidence weakens when progress becomes dependent on unpredictable social perception. Public recognition fluctuates according to attention cycles, cultural trends, and collective interests. These variables remain largely outside personal control. Yet the status game convinces individuals that recognition represents the ultimate validation of success. When recognition becomes the primary reward, internal motivation gradually weakens. You may still work diligently, yet your sense of accomplishment becomes tied to how others interpret your progress. This dependency introduces constant uncertainty because public interpretation can shift quickly. The status game, therefore, creates an environment where individuals feel compelled to compete continuously for attention and approval. However, meaningful confidence rarely develops within such unstable conditions. Confidence requires internal stability rooted in disciplined self-respect. It grows when individuals pursue excellence because excellence itself reflects personal responsibility. Status competition rarely encourages that perspective. Instead, it promotes the belief that victory occurs only when others remain behind. This mindset produces unnecessary hostility toward the success of others. Another person's achievement begins feeling like a threat rather than an example of possibility. Yet the truth remains simple and often overlooked. Human progress does not operate as a limited resource that one individual must capture at another person's expense. Many forms of success can exist simultaneously without diminishing the value of another person's progress. The status game hides this reality by framing life as a single hierarchy where everyone must fight for position. When you accept that framing without question, comparison becomes unavoidable. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to measure where you stand relative to others. This constant measurement eventually drains the satisfaction from your own achievements. Even meaningful accomplishments begin feeling incomplete if someone else appears further ahead. Confidence recovers when you step outside the assumption that life must operate according to a universal ranking system. Your purpose does not require universal comparison in order to remain meaningful. Your work gains value through the discipline and responsibility you bring to it, not through its position within a public hierarchy. Once you recognize the status game for what it truly represents, its influence begins weakening. You stop interpreting every achievement as part of a competition. Instead, you return your attention toward developing the abilities and contributions that belong uniquely to you. The moment your identity stops depending on social ranking, the pressure of constant comparison begins dissolving. Your progress becomes meaningful again because it reflects your commitment rather than your relative position. And within that quiet commitment, confidence begins rebuilding on stable ground. Chapter 5. The Identity Collapse. When your self-worth becomes dependent on other people. Your identity weakens the moment your sense of worth becomes dependent on how other people appear to be living their lives. Identity was never designed to function as a reflection of other individuals' visible achievements or public recognition. Yet comparison quietly trains the mind to treat external observation as a reliable measure of personal value. When this habit strengthens over time, your internal sense of direction slowly begins dissolving. You begin defining yourself through contrast rather than through purpose. Instead of asking who you are becoming through disciplined effort, You begin asking how your life appears beside someone else's visible success. This shift introduces a dangerous instability into your identity. Your worth becomes linked to information that constantly changes and rarely reflects full reality. The moment another person's progress appears more visible, more celebrated, or more financially rewarded, your mind begins questioning your own standing. This questioning rarely remains intellectual or detached. It gradually becomes emotional because identity involves deeply held beliefs about who you are and where your life is moving. When comparison repeatedly challenges those beliefs, your internal structure begins losing its stability. You may still possess skills, values, and commitments that define your character. However, comparison interrupts your ability to recognize their importance. The mind becomes preoccupied with visible signals rather than deeper foundations. Instead of grounding your identity in responsibility, discipline, and contribution, you begin grounding it in recognition. Recognition, however, remains one of the most unstable foundations upon which identity can rest. Public attention fluctuates according to circumstances beyond your control. A person may receive extraordinary recognition during one stage of life and very little during another. If your identity depends on recognition, your sense of worth will fluctuate in the same unpredictable way. Comparison accelerates this instability by constantly presenting new examples of visible success. Each example introduces another opportunity for your mind to question whether your life carries the same significance. Over time, this repeated questioning produces a quiet erosion of certainty. You may still continue your work, yet the deeper conviction behind that work becomes weaker. Instead of moving forward with calm determination, you begin moving forward while secretly wondering whether your path truly matters. That uncertainty gradually drains the emotional energy required for sustained discipline. Effort becomes heavier because it no longer rests on stable belief. Another consequence of identity collapse is the gradual adoption of borrowed ambitions. When comparison weakens your connection to your own values, you become more vulnerable to adopting goals that originate from someone else's path. You observe what others are pursuing and assume that similar outcomes must define success for you as well. However, borrowed ambitions rarely align with your genuine strengths or responsibilities. They often reflect external admiration rather than internal conviction. Pursuing such ambitions eventually creates internal tension because your daily effort begins serving goals that do not fully belong to you. The tension may remain difficult to explain, yet it steadily undermines motivation. You may achieve visible progress within these borrowed goals, yet the progress feels strangely hollow. Your mind recognizes that recognition alone cannot replace authentic alignment with purpose. Identity collapses most severely when comparison convinces you that your own path lacks legitimacy. You begin doubting whether your natural interests, responsibilities, or talents deserve the same respect as someone else's visible achievements. This doubt disconnects you from the internal authority that should guide your life. Without that authority, your decisions become reactive rather than deliberate. You begin adjusting your direction according to external signals instead of principled judgment. The result is a life that feels increasingly fragmented. Different areas of effort pull you toward different expectations, yet none of those expectations fully represent who you are meant to become. Confidence struggles to survive within such fragmentation. Confidence grows when identity feels coherent and stable. It strengthens when your actions reflect a clear understanding of your values and responsibilities. Comparison disrupts this clarity by constantly introducing alternative standards. Each standard suggests a different definition of success. When your mind tries to satisfy all of them simultaneously, your identity becomes scattered. Restoring identity requires returning your attention to foundations that cannot be determined through comparison. Your worth must be anchored in qualities that remain independent of external visibility. Discipline, integrity, responsibility, and commitment provide such foundations because they depend entirely on your own choices. No other individual can strengthen or weaken these qualities on your behalf. When identity rests on these foundations, comparison loses its authority. Another person's achievement no longer threatens your sense of worth. It simply represents another individual's progress within a different set of circumstances. You regain the freedom to respect that progress without interpreting it as evidence of your own deficiency. Identity regains strength when your self-respect depends on how faithfully you carry your responsibilities. You measure your life through alignment between your values and your actions. Each day becomes an opportunity to reinforce that alignment through disciplined effort. Recognition may still arrive or disappear according to circumstances. However, your sense of worth remains stable because it does not rely on recognition. When identity rests securely on responsibility and integrity, comparison becomes irrelevant. You understand that another person's visible success cannot invalidate the quiet significance of your own path. And within that understanding, your confidence begins recovering its natural strength. Chapter 6. The Mental Noise Problem. How comparison creates anxiety, overthinking, and self-doubt. The human mind performs best when it can direct attention toward purposeful action without unnecessary internal interference. Clarity allows thought to move efficiently toward decisions, effort, and disciplined execution. However, comparison introduces a form of psychological noise that gradually disrupts this clarity. Mental noise appears when your attention becomes crowded with questions that do not contribute to meaningful progress. Comparison produces such questions with remarkable consistency. Instead of focusing entirely on your work, your mind begins asking whether someone else is doing better, moving faster, or receiving greater recognition. Each question demands attention even though it offers no practical guidance. Your mind therefore spends energy analyzing information that cannot improve your immediate action. Over time, this process creates persistent cognitive pressure. The mind becomes occupied with evaluating external situations rather than strengthening internal focus. Anxiety often develops within this environment because comparison constantly introduces uncertainty. You begin wondering how others interpret your progress or whether you are meeting invisible expectations. These concerns may not reflect actual criticism from others. Yet comparison convinces your mind that judgment could appear at any moment. The anticipation of judgment generates tension that interferes with calm concentration. Instead of directing your attention toward disciplined execution, your thoughts repeatedly drift toward imagined evaluation. This drift fragments your focus. Work that once required steady attention becomes interrupted by repeated internal questioning. The interruptions may last only a few seconds each time, yet their cumulative effect becomes significant. Consistent focus gradually dissolves into scattered attention. When focus weakens, productivity often declines. Ironically, this decline may appear to confirm the very doubts that comparison introduced. Your mind interprets reduced performance as evidence that you truly are falling behind. The anxiety, therefore, strengthens itself through circular reasoning. Overthinking frequently emerges from the same pattern. When comparison fills your mind with competing interpretations of success, decision-making becomes more complicated than necessary. You begin analyzing multiple potential outcomes, each one influenced by how it might appear relative to other people. Simple choices, therefore, become prolonged internal debates. Instead of asking what action best serves your purpose, you begin asking which action might protect your reputation or improve your perceived standing. This shift burdens your thinking with unnecessary complexity. Decisions that once required clear judgment now require extended deliberation. You may delay action because no option appears completely safe from potential comparison. This hesitation introduces another layer of mental noise. Your mind repeatedly revisits unresolved decisions, consuming attention that could otherwise strengthen productive efforts. Self-doubt thrives in such an environment because clarity has already been weakened. When attention remains divided between purposeful work and external evaluation, your confidence in your own judgment begins declining. You begin questioning whether your instincts are reliable. Even decisions that once felt obvious now appear uncertain. The mind searches constantly for reassurance that rarely arrives. Comparison also intensifies the fear of making visible mistakes. When your attention remains fixed on how others appear to be succeeding, errors begin feeling especially dangerous. You imagine that mistakes will confirm the negative comparisons already forming within your mind. This fear can quietly discourage experimentation and learning. However, progress requires the willingness to encounter temporary failure during the process of improvement. When comparison amplifies the fear of mistakes, your growth slows because caution replaces exploration. Mental noise, therefore, weakens both productivity and development. You remain busy thinking, yet the thinking does not move your life forward. Instead, it circulates endlessly around imagined evaluations and uncertain rankings. Escaping this noise requires deliberate discipline. You must recognize that comparison introduces questions which your mind is not obligated to answer. Not every thought deserves your attention. Some thoughts represent distractions rather than useful analysis. When comparison generates a question about someone else's progress, you can simply acknowledge the thought and return your attention to the task before you. This response requires practice because the mind initially resists releasing comparison. Yet each time you redirect your focus, you strengthen the habit of disciplined attention. Clarity gradually returns when your thinking becomes centered on action rather than evaluation. Anxiety diminishes when your attention remains anchored in work you can control. Overthinking declines when decisions are guided by purpose instead of public perception. Self-doubt loses strength when repeated action reinforces trust in your own judgment. Mental quiet does not arrive suddenly. It develops slowly as you withdraw attention from comparisons that never deserved authority. When your mind becomes quieter, your energy returns to the work that truly shapes your future. Within that renewed focus, confidence begins rebuilding through consistent effort and steady responsibility. Your thoughts become fewer, clearer, and more purposeful. And in that calm clarity, your progress regains its natural momentum. Chapter 7. The Confidence Reset. Rebuilding self-worth without measuring yourself against others.
Rebuilding confidence begins with the decision to remove external comparison as the authority over your sense of value.
You cannot reclaim authentic self-worth while continually asking whether someone else appears to be ahead or more successful. Every time you allow another person's visible achievement to define your worth, your confidence weakens, often without immediate awareness. The first step in resetting confidence is understanding that your value exists independently of external acknowledgement, recognition, or visible benchmarks. No external measure can fully capture the significance of your effort, preparation, or disciplined execution. Once you internalize this truth, your mind begins to stop automatically assigning meaning to other people's outcomes. Instead, attention gradually returns to your own effort, your own growth, and your own principles. Confidence rebuilds only when your evaluation system becomes rooted in self-assessment, measured against internal standards rather than shifting public opinion. You must establish clear markers of progress that exist entirely within your control. These markers could be daily completion of disciplined tasks, incremental improvement in skills, or consistent adherence to principles of integrity and responsibility. When progress is measured by your own benchmarks, each success becomes evidence of capability rather than a fragile response to comparison. Equally important is recognizing the cumulative effect of consistent effort over time. Confidence does not grow in bursts of external validation. It grows quietly in repeated alignment between purpose and action. When you focus on building competence, reliability, and mastery in your own life, the mind begins internalizing proof of capability from consistent results. This form of proof is more stable than any public acknowledgement because it relies on observable reality within your sphere of responsibility. Another crucial component of a confidence reset involves actively disengaging from mental habits that amplify comparison. Whenever you notice a thought questioning your worth against someone else, you must interrupt it deliberately. Acknowledge the thought, then redirect attention toward measurable actions that strengthen your growth. Over time, this practice trains your mind to resist defaulting to comparison as a gauge of value. Silence becomes a tool, not a weakness. By intentionally refusing to validate comparison, you create mental space for reflection, analysis, and disciplined decision-making. Confidence requires space to grow, free from unnecessary external interference. Rebuilding self-worth also requires you to redefine failure and success on terms that reflect your responsibilities, values, and objectives. Failure should be interpreted as feedback within your controlled environment, not as evidence that you are lagging behind someone else. Success should be acknowledged as an outcome of alignment between effort and principle, rather than a public display of achievement. By consistently applying these definitions, your identity gradually stabilizes because it no longer fluctuates according to external signals. Every day of discipline, purposeful action reinforces a self-assessment that becomes increasingly reliable and resilient. Comparison loses its power as your mind internalizes that progress and accomplishment are measured by effort, responsibility, and alignment with personal values. Your confidence then transitions from fragile, externally validated belief to resilient, internally grounded certainty. This reset does not occur overnight. It requires patience, repetition, and the deliberate reinforcement of personal standards against which you evaluate all progress. Yet each small moment of self-directed action compounds over time, restoring your sense of capability and self-worth. Once the reset begins, you no longer require external reference points to confirm your value. Each achievement becomes sufficient evidence of competence, and each failure becomes a tool for learning, not a reflection of inadequacy. The confidence reset transforms the source of your validation from shifting external conditions to disciplined internal measurement. Your mind gains freedom to focus on purpose, mastery, and deliberate growth without distraction. And within that clarity, authentic self-worth flourishes because it can no longer be hijacked by the illusions of comparison. Chapter 8. The Personal Path Principle. Why your life cannot be compared to anyone else's timeline. Your life follows a trajectory defined by variables that are entirely unique to you, and any attempt to compare it to another person's path is inherently flawed. Circumstances, timing, opportunities, responsibilities, and natural aptitude all differ, creating a combination that cannot be replicated or accurately measured against others. Comparison assumes that visible progress or achievement is universal, when in reality, every life unfolds according to a sequence of moments that exists only within its own context. When you measure your progress against someone else, you ignore the countless unseen factors shaping their outcomes. You see the result, but you never see the preparation, setbacks, sacrifices, or resources that contributed to it. This distorted perspective convinces your mind that their timeline provides a legitimate benchmark for yours. It does not. Your timeline is constructed from decisions, constraints, and experiences that no other person shares, making direct comparison both irrational and harmful. True growth requires embracing the uniqueness of your path, including its pace, detours, and periods of unseen preparation. You must resist the impulse to assign external significance to milestones that appear on someone else's schedule. Doing so strengthens your ability to remain patient and disciplined while operating within your own conditions. Every life contains inherent limitations and advantages, some visible, most invisible. Your ability to succeed depends not on the timing of others, but on consistent alignment between your effort and personal principles. You advance effectively when your focus remains on what is within your control: the work you do, the habits you form, and the decisions you make. Comparison only distracts from these controllable variables by shifting attention toward outcomes shaped by forces beyond your influence. The personal path principle requires deep recognition of this distinction. You measure your progress internally, appreciating effort for its own sake rather than for its public acknowledgement or resemblance to another's journey. Patience becomes a natural byproduct because your mind understands that growth cannot be rushed to align with external benchmarks. You also begin to develop clarity regarding priorities because your attention centers on personal responsibility rather than social validation. The ability to remain grounded in your own path produces resilience when unexpected delays, setbacks, or obstacles appear. No other person experiences the exact sequence of challenges or opportunities that you face, making comparisons irrelevant and unproductive. Every decision you make, every skill you build, every disciplined action compounds into progress that is meaningful only within the context of your own life. Your timeline cannot be fast-forwarded, paused, or compared to someone else's external achievements. The moment you internalize this principle, the mental pressure to match others dissipates. Your focus sharpens on the alignment between effort and purpose, which is the only reliable measure of progress. Comparison, once a persistent distraction, loses authority because your mind recognizes it as irrelevant to the unique variables defining your journey. This recognition restores freedom and stability, allowing you to act decisively without the weight of perceived competition. Confidence grows naturally when effort is evaluated within your own timeline rather than against someone else's visible achievements. Patience, clarity, and self-trust emerge as your guiding metrics. By honoring the personal path principle, you reclaim control over how progress is measured, how decisions are made, and how self-worth is determined. Comparison becomes irrelevant because your trajectory cannot be copied, accelerated, or benchmarked against external timelines. Your path, with all its complexity, is sufficient, complete, and valid. Chapter 9. The Freedom Mindset. Escaping the comparison. Trap and reclaiming your confidence. Freedom begins when you deliberately remove comparison from the process of evaluating your life, decisions, and worth. You are no longer required to measure yourself against external outcomes because your value has been re-anchored in principles, effort, and disciplined alignment with purpose. The freedom mindset refuses to grant authority to signals over which you have no control. Recognition, social visibility, and public approval become secondary rather than central to your evaluation of self. This mindset requires steady repetition because comparison has been reinforced over years, and the mind resists releasing its influence easily. Every instance of redirecting attention from external evaluation toward disciplined self-assessment strengthens the neural pathway supporting autonomy. Confidence returns as a direct result of repeated attention to what matters and consistent action in alignment with personal standards. The freedom mindset also involves rejecting borrowed ambitions that exist only to impress or measure up against others. You reclaim the right to pursue goals rooted in your unique strengths, responsibilities, and long-term vision. This reclamation produces a clarity that comparison cannot provide, because your choices are guided by principle rather than social judgment. Anxiety diminishes because you no longer anticipate constant evaluation. Decision-making accelerates because you rely on internal metrics rather than imagined rankings. Overthinking becomes unnecessary because every choice is weighed against your own responsibilities and goals, not the perceived position of others. Self-doubt loses authority when internal evaluation produces consistent evidence of capability and alignment. The freedom mindset produces steady confidence because it relies on internal stability rather than external validation. It creates a life where progress is measured by disciplined effort, responsibility, and alignment with values. Comparison becomes irrelevant because its signals are neither accurate nor necessary. Your trajectory regains legitimacy, your identity regains coherence, and your attention regains focus. Freedom, clarity, and confidence coexist because each decision, action, and accomplishment derives meaning from internal principles rather than external benchmarks. Within this mindset, you can act decisively, pursue meaningful growth, and experience satisfaction that does not fluctuate according to someone else's visible progress. Comparison no longer dictates thought, behavior, or self-worth. Instead, deliberate focus, consistent effort, and internal measurement guide every step forward. By embracing the freedom mindset, you reclaim authority over your life and rebuild confidence that cannot be undermined by external observation. Your path becomes entirely your own, and within that ownership, true progress, satisfaction, and self-assurance flourish.